Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. As the world watches, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi lands in Taiwan, defying threats from Beijing. How the White House is reacting, and a rare move by Republicans. NTD's Iris Tao has the details.
Touching down in Taiwan late Tuesday night, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi defies warnings from China and becomes the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit the democratically ruled island in a quarter-century. Upon arrival, Pelosi releasing a statement saying America's solidarity with the island is, quote, more important today than ever, as the world faces a choice between autocracy and democracy.
USA Taiwan, welcome Nancy.
And supporters around the airport telling NTD that they're grateful for her standing up to Beijing.
The Chinese Communist Party is ruthlessly trying to marginalize Taiwanese internationally. Yet Speaker Pelosi is willing to stand up for Taiwan against all odds.
The visit prompting a furious response from China, which claims Taiwan as its own and has repeatedly threatened to annex it by force. State media has reported that Chinese fighter jets were crossing the Taiwan Strait as Pelosi was arriving. And just minutes after her plane landed, China's army announced it would conduct live fire exercises around the island.
It's exactly in line with the playbook that we anticipated.
But the White House, while reiterating it does not support Taiwan independence, says the U.S. is prepared for Beijing's actions.
We will continue to support Taiwan, defend a free and open Indo-Pacific, and seek to maintain communication with Beijing.
And U.S. lawmakers coming together in a rare bipartisan moment.
You do not want the Chinese Communist Party dictating to senior American leaders where they can and cannot travel.
26 Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell, issued a statement backing the Democratic speaker. That's despite the Senate Minority Leader calling out Biden, who previously told the public that the U.S. military did not support the trip.
And it's been unseemly and counterproductive for President Biden and his aides to have publicly sought to deter her from doing so.
And after spending her night in Taipei, the House Speaker is meeting with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday. She's also reportedly meeting with activists about China's human rights abuses. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
5 states throughout the country are holding their primary elections today. Folks in Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington State are casting their ballots. Let's take a look at some of the key races.
In Michigan, Republicans will choose a candidate to face off against Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. 5 political newcomers are competing in a tight race. Former President Trump on Friday endorsed conservative commentator Tudor Dixon. Trump also jumped into a House race in a district currently represented by Republican Congressman Peter Meijer. He was one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. The former president has endorsed businessman and missionary John Gibbs, who worked in the Trump administration. And over in Kansas, voters will decide whether the state will continue to allow access to abortion. Kansas is the first state to vote on abortion after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The election commissioner of Wyandotte County says putting the question on the ballot has had an impact.
And we're getting a lot of increased voter turnout because of it. I think early voting as of this morning, we have about 2,000 more early voters than we did back in 2018, and we have a little over 1,000 more voters who requested a ballot than we did back in 2018. So we definitely have an uptick in voter registration and people getting out to vote.
In Missouri, the race for Republican Senate nomination is between former Governor Eric Greitens and Eric Schmidt, the state attorney general. On Monday, Trump made an unusual statement saying he's endorsing Eric. Both Greitens and Schmidt claimed Trump's endorsement in tweets sent just minutes apart. When asked for clarification, a Trump spokesman said the statement speaks for itself. In Arizona, voters will pick between Trump-backed gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake and Karen Taylor Robson, who has the backing of former Vice President Mike Pence. For Democrats, Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs is facing Marco Lopez, a former Obama administration official and former mayor of Nogales, a border city. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey will not run again due to term limits. And in Washington State, the 3rd Congressional District is represented by Jamie Herrera Butler, who voted for Trump's impeachment in 2021. She's facing a primary challenge from Joe Kent, a former Green Beret officer who's been endorsed by Trump.
With multiple states having primary elections, election integrity is in the spotlight yet again. I chatted with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney recently about her own election and how she started the Election Integrity Caucus in Congress.
Claudia Tenney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be on.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about your most recent election. You had a very interesting race, to put it mildly, when it comes to election integrity. If you could remind us how your race actually played out that night and what had you most concerned about the result?
Yeah, my election was very extraordinary because I was winning by 28,422 votes, because we know the numbers now. It took 100 days of counting in court. It was all done under the guidance of a Supreme Court justice in upstate New York. And it took 100 days of staring down Mark Elias and his attempts to overturn our election. I think the election could be characterized by the pandemic and the fact that Governor Cuomo at the time changed the election rules over 100 times, making it almost impossible for our boards of elections to really manage this election with high turnout in a presidential election. First time we had early voting, allowing no excuse absentee voting, providing an online database where people could actually register to vote. They were vote harvesting that way without securing the identity of the people that were asking for votes, without really verifying. No signature requirement, all required by New York's Constitution. And all these rules were put on the wayside to enhance the ability of vote harvesting. And then those laws continue to be in place. And then, incredibly, in my election, as Mark Elias continued to try to uncover votes, we found all kinds of irregularities, votes found in drawers, votes found on shelves, and this is, weeks and even months after the election. And finally, in January of 2021, we were actually registering voters, registering them to vote and count those votes in the 2020 election, well after Election Day. So it was a huge amount of irregularities. We were able to pull it out by 109 votes. And that's what caused me to form the Election Integrity Caucus, just to find out what's really going on, to ensure that we have free and fair elections. We secure the private right to vote, maintain one citizen, one vote, easier to vote and harder to cheat. Because my dream is to make sure every legal citizen who's entitled to vote exercises that right as a self-governing constitutional republic. It is just essential that people understand that we are not an authoritarian regime. We are driven by the people, and their right to vote is really their greatest expression of self-governance.
So is there, or what is the single biggest issue that you think is facing, or biggest challenge, our election system?
Right now, it is the interference of private money that was through Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook billionaire, who put over $419 or so million into really targeted zones, into swing state areas, and almost a little over 92% only Democrat areas, where they were trying to prime the pump. Some of it was legal, and that's probably the biggest concern that many of us had. So I introduced a bill called the Stop Zuckerbucks Act. This money was filtered through 501c3, so it was using our federal tax protection system, just stating that we can no longer do this. We can't have this shield. A number of states have passed this, including Florida and numerous others, and also a number of states, including Florida, which Governor Ron DeSantis has been a leader on this, is criminalized vote harvesting and the attempt to undermine our election system. Unfortunately, we've won on Zuckerbucks because Mark Zuckerberg and others have decided not to intervene in our elections, but President Joe Biden signed an executive order, which I think is unconstitutional, taking $1 billion in taxpayer dollars and putting that money into, again, giving federal agencies like HUD, the Small Business Administration, and inviting agencies which have nothing to do with elections to be the centers for where we can collect votes, secure votes, and also register voters. This should be the sole job of experts and people who are trained, who understand the importance of the integrity of elections in the boards of elections, in the states, in the counties, and places where we know that our right to vote is going to be secured.
You mentioned a few of the states that have passed some election reform. Another one of those states, I believe, is Georgia. And one of the main things in their bill was chain of custody. It sounds like chain of custody was an issue in your election, potentially. What would you like to see in regard to that?
Right. Chain of custody is another way of saying we need to make sure that every citizen that votes in the United States, their vote is private. that the government doesn't know how you vote, because once the government knows how you vote, that opens the door to what we see in the Soviet Union, China, communist regimes, authoritarian regimes, is the government actually knows how you vote, and that's intimidation. And when the government can intimidate you and make you feel, geez, we gotta vote the way the dictator wants us to, or we're not going to get our benefits, or we're not going to get our freedom, or we're going to be sent to a gulag. That's why we have so many laws in place, is really because of that. Our founders saw this early on when the New York State government actually created Article 2, which covers elections. They knew how important it was not to have government officials and partisans being able to intimidate the voters and their right to vote freely, fairly, and securely, and privately. That's the real key issue there.
Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.